Welcome to All Things Moore County, Moore County's weekly radio show highlighting the many facets of the Sandhills. That includes real estate, lifestyle, community and neighborhoods. And now from 4 Properties, here's your host, Bill Sahadi.
Good morning. Welcome to the talk show, All Things Moore County. Dorothy, spring is close to being in the air.
I'm hoping so.
Well, you know, people get reawakened in springtime. Yep. Creativity starts to flow.
Yep. And
people's imagination start to open up after a winter, no matter where they live, except if they're in this really deep southeast. With that in mind, our guest today is Teri Brown, and she is an author. She wrote a book called Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. And it's fiction. It's a novel. And it talks a lot about the tenacity and the resilience of women against all odds, so to speak, where they can find the sunshine in the rain. And today, Teri is going to speak about her Moore County roots, her inspiration for the book. We're obviously going to talk about the book, her family, and equally important, tips for aspiring writers. What gets them from here to there, and how does that process look from somebody who's done it? So with that in mind, Teri, I'll say good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
We were communicating a couple of times before the show, and I'm always intrigued by people who have a passion. And you obviously have a passion, and it's for writing. And you actually have local roots here and a connection to the Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So I moved here from Ohio when I was 15 years old. And I can, I'll be very honest, I was very angry. I was an angry 15-year-old who had been moved from Ohio from a very big town to Southern Pines area, which at the time had one stoplight.
That's right.
Yeah.
There were 3.
I think there was just one in 1979.
There were 3 restaurants.
That's okay. Yes, it was the stoplight. I believe was at US 1 and 15501. It's the only one I remember.
Oh my gosh.
And I was horrified. I could not believe that my parents had done this terrible thing to me.
And this was 1979?
1979, January, right before the big ice storm.
The first time I ever came here was July of 1979.
Okay, so you and I are in the same boat. Well,
Yep.
I got here for the ice storm that you missed.
I missed it.
And we had no furniture because it was on the truck that couldn't get here because of the ice storm. And we were living in a condominium that my parents were renting until we could find a home. And in general, I hated them. I was really unhappy. But within about 6 months, I had made friends and I was going to school, and I've lived in North Carolina ever since, and I love this area.
And you went to and graduated from Pinecrest?
Well, I actually went to Pinecrest my second half of my freshman year and my sophomore year, and then I went to the North Carolina School of Science and Math my junior and senior year, so I graduated from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
What brought your dad here, your mom here?
I think it was a midlife crisis. I'm not positive. My dad is in construction. He did remodeling type work, and I think they just got tired of the snow. And I came home from school one day, and there was a for sale sign in the yard, and I couldn't believe it. And they had come here on vacation, decided they loved it, and we moved here.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was crazy.
So you graduated high school from the North Carolina School of Math and Science.
Yeah.
So is that not the antithesis of what writing is?
So, yeah, it's pretty interesting because you would think that everyone who went to the North Carolina School of Math and Science is just completely math and science.
Right.
And, you've got your NASA engineers and all those kinds of people, and that did happen. But and I'm the first graduating class. So something that was very interesting to the people who put the school together is, they gathered together all these kids with the high IQs, right, and shove them all together, and they expected us to do nothing but be nerdy, science and math geeks and do nothing else. And they found out very quickly that they needed to develop a choir and a band and some sports teams and writing and photography and ceramics. And there's a lot of creativity. Just because you're good in a math or science field doesn't mean you have no creativity. It isn't an either or proposition. And so really, when I go back now and look at the people I graduated with, about half of us did way more creative type things with our lives, and the other half went much more structured in the science and math. So
you finished high school, you went to college, you did you go to school here in North Carolina?
Yeah, so I went to UNC Chapel Hill for a year. I did not like it. It was too big for me. I had graduated with 148 kids, and then I went to this. It was just overwhelming for me. So I took about a year and a half off. Then I went to UNC Greensboro, which was a much better fit for me. The classes were smaller. The campus was smaller. And so I have 2 degrees and a minor and almost another minor because I'm that person that can't quite figure out what I want to do. And I've used pretty much none of it.
Yeah. So did you wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to be a writer?
No. So as a kid, I wanted to be a writer.
Oh, you did?
Well,
okay.
But I also wanted to be an Olympic ice skater and a brain surgeon. So,
right.
I don't know what that meant. But I wrote a lot as a child. And my mom sent me something the other day. It was really cute. She had found this poem that I had written, and it was on the back of my grandma's bank deposit slip. So it was probably like fished out of her purse, and, I did my little scribbling on it. But I always enjoyed the idea of writing, and then life kind of got in the way. I was a mom. I have 4 children. I homeschooled them, so I was very busy. I ended up divorced, and then I had another relationship that was not a good relationship. It was emotionally abusive, and I didn't believe in myself anymore. And so I was doing some writing, but I was writing for businesses and doing like blog posts and things. And that didn't scare me because it wasn't me. It was facts, and it was just me writing about facts. And so I felt like I could do that. But there were these characters that really wanted to be told, but I was too afraid to let them out.
Most writers that I've spoken to tend to indicate that they evolved into writing, that it was not something, you didn't go to school and take a class and go, okay, you passed a class, now you're a writer.
Now you're a writer. No.
It's not like that, is it?
I don't think it is. I mean, some people go that route, and I think maybe it works for them. Maybe as a young child they really understood themselves, but I don't think I really understood myself until recently, and even then, 10 years from now, I hope I say, well, I didn't really understand myself then either, because, that's an evolution. So for me, it was more, I don't know, just getting the bravery to allow those ideas that I had out on paper. And then the next step was the bravery to let someone read them. Allow for a critique, allow for someone to look at it and say, well, that's pretty good, but.
Right.
Because that's hard. When people didn't like a blog post that I wrote, it didn't bother me, because usually it meant, for instance, they didn't care for real estate and so they weren't interested, and so what difference did it make? But if they don't like your character,
right,
that's kind of like not liking you. And it's a little scarier to let that out into the world, because it'd be like someone looking at your child and saying, well, I don't like your child. Well, excuse me, you better love my child, so yeah, it's that kind of feeling.
But to be a writer and to believe in your craft, right, you have to be able to do it in spite of what people say and not focus on that.
Exactly. And so you have to get to that point in your life where you can do that.
There's a freedom to do that.
Right. And for me, that's only been recently. I started writing fiction in 2017.
Wow.
So it was the first time I allowed myself to sit down and, well, not the first time, since childhood. It was the first time as an adult that I allowed myself to go ahead and do it. And I sat down and I wrote a novel, and it is no good. It will never see the light of day. Or if it does, I'll have to go back.
This is what you're saying to yourself?
No, it's true. It's the first one I wrote is terrible.
Okay.
It's horrible.
Okay.
But that's okay.
Right.
Because guess what I learned? I learned that I had 50,000 words in me.
Yeah.
I could do it.
Yeah.
It was a story that had a beginning and a middle and an end.
Right.
It went through. It made sense and actually has some good bones to it. I could potentially go back to it someday and reinvent it and make it into something. I have all kinds of flaws. I could not make my character have any flaws. My characters were perfect. And I couldn't let them be anything but perfect because they were my babies. And I've learned characters have to have flaws because they're human, and you don't connect with characters that don't have some humanity to them.
So did you have a tendency to over-identify with the character?
Yeah. And so like my first character is me.
Okay.
I mean, my first character is me, but it was me in a perfect version, and it was me being able to go through and fix all of my life problems, and and it all turned out and happily ever after. It's crap.
You make me think. You make me think of the young lady, Grace Vanderhall, who was on America's Got Talent as this cute little kid who came out and sang a song that she wrote. She was in like 7th or 8th grade, and Simon Cowell says to her, "So, you're going to sing a song?" She goes, "Yes." "And what are you going to sing?" And she says, "An original song." And he looked like, "Really? You're in 8th grade or 7th grade? What's it about?" And she goes, "Me. It's about me." And it was. And because at that age, I guess that's all she could identify with.
Right.
And
What other experiences did she have? She couldn't sing about life.
Yeah.
She was how old?
8th grade,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
So you had that going on, but you kept moving along and you kept evolving.
Well, after that, I realized that I did have ability. It wasn't honed yet. I hadn't done enough writing. You have to write in order to be good at writing. You can't just one day say, "Oh, so today I'm a writer," and then sit down and write, any more than you can be a photographer or a real estate agent. I mean, you have to do some things to work at it.
Right.
But that kind of opened the floodgates. And so I wrote another. And it also is not very good.
Okay.
It was better than the first one. My characters had a few flaws. I was able to do a lot more showing versus telling. I had taken a little online course that was like 3 hours long, and I learned a few things, and I read a few books, and I started paying more attention. I love to read. I've loved to read my whole life, but I started paying a little more attention to what was the author doing to make that book one I wanted to pick up versus one I wanted to put down.
And what was the answer to that question?
For me, and so it's different for everybody. There's so many different kinds of books out there, but I'm a very character-driven author, and I'm a very character-driven reader. My characters have to be very relatable, and I want to feel like I could potentially be that person, even if it's a man, or even if it's someone doing a job that I could never do, a NASA scientist or something that isn't my thing. I want to be able to feel like I could while I'm reading that book. And so I would look at books that way, as to how is that author making that character real? And it had a lot to do with feelings and being able to pull in what are their inner thoughts.
So you have to also look at movies or docuseries the same way.
Yeah.
And the character development, if you can start identifying with the characters and rooting for them or whatever,
it's a good story.
That's a good story.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's what makes successful, these days of Netflix.
Exactly.
You have a choice, it's like a Greek smorgasbord of, here's a 52 episode season of this and this or that. And what makes it click, do you relate to the characters?
Exactly. Now, some authors are more about world building. That's a lot of the science fiction to me, where they've created this whole new world. And they do character building there too, but it's a lot more about the world that they live in. And those that like to read that tend to really get into that world. That's not my kind of writing.
Okay.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying there's different ways to go about writing. And I have characters that are they're in my head, and that's going to make me sound crazy, and I'm not crazy, and I don't need to be medicated. But I have characters in my head that they whisper to me and they tell me their stories, and I have to get them down on paper.
Right.
It's about characters.
Okay.
And then the characters tell me where they need to be, and they tell me where the story's going to take place, and they tell me what needs to happen next. So
in the book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, in our conversation before our show, there was somebody in the book that represented somebody you knew in real life.
That is true.
And your daughters knew.
Yeah.
You have 4 children.
I have 4 children.
Age range and...
So my son, let me get this right. My son is 30. My son is 32.
Okay.
And
what's his birthday and his social security number?
And they're 3 years apart. So I have a 29-year-old daughter, a 26-year-old daughter, and a 23-year-old daughter.
Wow.
So
you had a pretty active household.
yes, I had a very active
Oh
household.
my gosh. Well, adolescence must have been a blast.
It was, and 3 girls. All, yeah. Just think about that for just a moment. But no, it was wonderful, and I really enjoyed being a mom and I was a stay-at-home mom, and I did work from home doing my writing for small businesses, but I did it from home, and so I was able to, and I homeschooled, and I was able to be there with my kids, and I loved that part of my life, but I did that for 22 years of homeschooling, and I'm now, they're all on their own, they're doing their thing, and now I'm doing mine.
So yeah. So you never stop living. You have to keep growing.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter. Age is not important because if you live this compartmentalized life, oh my gosh, you if you lose that passion, what are you going to do?
Well, and when I turned 50, so I'm 58, and when I turned 50, it was the most horrible year of my life. And I just couldn't shake the fact that I was a half-century year old, and what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And my life is over as I know it. And 3 of my kids,
funny.
well, 3 of my kids had already moved from home, so I was down to 1.
Yeah.
She's a very independent, doesn't need you much kind of child, so I felt almost childless at the time. I was not in a very good relationship, and so all of that just left me feeling very wide-eyed.
Yep.
And I started realizing, I can't keep neglecting me. There are a lot of things that I put on hold, and I did it purposefully. But now I didn't have to do that anymore. So I started bringing things back in. Like I learned to play the piano. I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy it. And so I learned to play the piano, and I've taken some art classes, and I started going out to lunch with friends, and I started going to the theater, and I started doing things that I didn't have time for when I was raising 4 children.
So the ability to reinvent yourself as you go is huge.
Yeah. And I think it isn't even so much reinventing as just continuing to allow yourself to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
Who you are at 20 better not be who you are at 30 and who you are at 40 and 50 and 60 and 70. And I hope that if you and I had this conversation again in 20 years, that we would say, oh, so how have you grown in that last 2 decades?
Our guest is Teri Brown. Let's come back in the second set. Let's talk about the book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. Talk about some of your inspirations and reflections and some of the characters. This is All Things More County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our second set of All Things More County. Teri Brown is our guest. She's the author of the book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. And this is something that you didn't start as a school-age child, set out to be a writer. But this is a culmination of a lot of work in your life as a mother, growing, and this book represents a lot to you that you've arrived. I want you to talk about the book, but I also want you to put a timeline on the whole process from the characters in your head to the writing it on the paper, the inspiration, and the final product.
All right. So the book idea came to me because the character in the book that's Iona. And I'm not going to give her real name because that would be unfair to her. But Iona is a real character. It's someone that I knew. She was a friend of my daughter's. She was here from Ukraine, visiting for the summer so that she could work at a summer camp and then see the United States. And she was unable to go back to Ukraine because Russia had invaded right in her city, and her parents were displaced, and she ended up staying here in the United States. And she told me this incredible story that I felt needed to be told, but it wasn't long enough to be a real story. It just was this really cool little tidbit, and I took that and I expanded it and turned it into a novel. But I didn't do it right away. I had this idea and I felt like it needed to be done, but I was sure I wasn't the right person, and would I even be able to do it justice? And I had written a couple of things, but not much. And I don't know, I was just
trying to overcome your self-doubt.
Yeah. And I just really felt, I don't know, like was I really the right person? And, you're supposed to write about what you know, and I'd never been to Ukraine. And I don't know, I had a lot of doubts, but I had someone encourage me who just said, it's a story that needs to be told and you should tell it.
How many years ago was this?
3.
And isn't it interesting that today, with Ukraine and Russia, we are back to where we were.
Exactly back to where we were.
So that would give added relevance.
Yeah, and I hate that it's happening for them. I really do, but it's so ironic to me that of the stories that I've written, this is the one I took to the publisher, and it's coming out right now.
Right.
And so it is.
The
It's very
is
it's very relevant.
very
It's
prophetic.
very relevant. So I had an opportunity to go to Weymouth, and they have a writers in residency program.
Right.
And to go there, you have to be a North Carolina author, so you have to have some roots to North Carolina, and you have to have something published. It doesn't have to be a book. And I had articles and I had things, and so I thought, well, I'm going to give it a try. I wasn't sure that that they would even accept me, because I have what I call imposter syndrome, where I'm sure people are going to look at me and say, you're not really a writer, You're
going to be found out.
Yeah, and so and that's kind of hard to get over, because I don't know, even at Weymouth, you're paired up with other writers who are there. And so you get there, and I'm big and wide-eyed and scared, and there are these men and women who seem so secure in who they are, and it was like, oh, they're all going to find out that I'm just faking it here. But eventually I went and I wrote that story while I was there. And so you can go for 1 week or 2, and if you go for 1 week, they'll let you come again 1 week. So I often would go 1 week in the spring and 1 week in the fall. And I went, and in a week I wrote 50,000 words of that book. And I got it from start to finish.
Wow.
Now, no way was it ready to go be seen, but I got the story out. I got the bones out. I got the structure there.
Did you have the story in your mind from start
No.
to finish when you sat down?
No, so it's interesting. There's a couple of different ways that people write, and they call them plotters or pantsters. And a plotter sits down and they have everything kind of laid out. And a pantster is by the seat of their pants. Mm-hmm. And that's what I am.
Okay.
And it's because my characters change things all the time. So even I've tried to plot, because I thought maybe that was, I don't know, the correct way to do it. And I think it is correct for some people, but it's not correct for me, because my characters hate it. And so I'll have this whole storyline laid out, and they're over here yelling, but that's not what we're going to do now. See, this is what we're going to do, and now what are you going to do with your little plot over there? So I gave that up. I'm a pantser. I knew where the end was, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. And I just start writing, and my characters tell me what they need to do next. And so
Stephen Covey always said, start with the end in mind and move back.
Right.
And fill in the blanks.
And fill in the blanks. And so for me, that's what I did. So I got that first 50,000 words down, and then I didn't touch it again for a couple of months. And that's my process, because I need it to kind of percolate in my head. I just need it to rest. I liked what I had put down, and then I just needed it to rest. And then when I looked at it the next time, it was very obvious to me where the holes were, and it was very obvious to me what still needed more. And when I write that first draft, I don't worry so much about whether the characters are fully developed, or if I've got all of my facts just so, or sometimes I'll write and I'll realize I don't remember what I've named this character, and I'll just put first man from first chapter, and then I highlight it in yellow and keep going, because I don't want to stop the flow in my head. And so when I'm going back at this point, it's not ready to be seen by anyone yet. And then I go through and it's like, okay, so this is great information, but it needs a lot more detail, and it needs people to feel more. And I start filling it out.
Okay, I have one question before I ask you to talk about the book itself. How long did it take you in your life to trust your intuition?
I'm 58. It's only been recently.
Yeah.
I mean, it really has only been recently that I've been able to say,
yeah,
this is what I do and I'm good at it.
Yeah.
And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to be good at it.
Yeah. And when you're good at something and you're doing it, you're not worrying about what the masses are thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And so I've just quit worrying about them. If someone
Good for
doesn't
you.
like the book, then they don't like the book, and that's fine.
Yeah, right.
I don't like books. There are books that I've read that I don't like, and it doesn't reflect on the author at all. It reflects on me. It's what
Is this a
fits with me.
is this a book for women? Is it
So I felt it was a book for women because there's 3 main women characters. However, I have had several men read it, and they've all liked it. So I'm maybe changing my feeling about it. I feel like I write for women, and maybe it's just because I'm a woman and I know how women feel. And so my characters develop that a lot. And I didn't think maybe that male readers would enjoy that character development, but I'm finding that I'm wrong. And I've had several men. In fact, one man in particular is a good friend, and his wife was going to read the book. He had no intention of reading it. And he told me, he said, now, I'm a good friend and I love you, but I'm not reading the book. I don't read historical fiction. I'm not going to read it. And his wife, I don't know, somehow pushed him into reading the book, and he read it, and he told me, he said, I'm really surprised because I enjoyed it. He said, I really enjoyed it. So
Tell me the story.
the story is about 3 women, but it started with the grandmother in the story. She's married, and her husband is essentially a spy. He's a rebel, and he gets caught, and he has to make a very quick decision. Does he stay or does he leave? And he leaves, and he leaves them behind. And he does so because he feels that it's their best chance of survival. Mm-hmm. And so the story opens with that, and then we go through these 3 generations of women and how they're surviving in the Ukraine in these horrible conditions, because when he left, it was in the 70s. It was still Soviet Ukraine, lots of deprivation. And now she is a single mother of this child, and they're trying to figure out how are they living in this community. And then we kind of follow it through, and the child grows up, and she marries and has a child. And then that child is the one that I met that is here in the United States. And so it kind of follows them all the way through. And for me, the point of the story is the tenacity, their ability to love and to find hope and to find joy despite these grueling circumstances they find themselves in. The idea that they can't even find regular ingredients for the foods they normally eat, and they're constantly having to shift things around to figure out how can they make what they want to make or need to survive given what they have available to them.
Okay. We're going to pick right up on this in the 3rd set.
All right.
Our guest is Teri Brown. The book is Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. It's a story about a book that is available to purchase, but it's not about, it's about finishing off a life of work that has culminated in an expression that you're very proud of.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I can tell. This is All Things Moore County. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final set of All Things Moore County with author Teri Brown. She wrote a book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, and the title is very consistent with the story you were telling about the book, that even in oppressing times, there's always light at the end of the rainbow type of thing. Do you hope that the story of these 3 generations of women inspire others? What kind of feeling were you hoping to evoke?
I think I want people to understand that there really is hope, that regardless of what problem you're going through, we all have them. And it might not be as big as theirs, but we all have something that we're struggling with, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. In the book, I have a quote that I use, and I use it for myself, and it's, everything turns out okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end.
Oh, okay.
And it's kind of my way of keeping everything in perspective, that, yeah, things look pretty bad right now, but they have a way of kind of smoothing themselves out and becoming okay. Or you can get to the end of that trial and look back and see that, yes, it made things better. Or there was good that came from it. Or despite how bad it was, I was still able to survive and thrive and do these other things. And that's what I'd like people to understand.
No matter where you are in life, people have to always accommodate to their circumstances.
Yes.
And sometimes reset their priorities. And in order to do that, and to march forward, you've got to be able to see through it all. And it's not maybe the end and the final, because once you get there, other stuff will come up.
Exactly.
It never ends.
No, it doesn't end. But in terms of it's okay in the end, I think when you get to the end of that trial or the end of that period of time, that you can say, there.
Yeah.
I made it through, and it is okay. Now it's okay. Was it good at the time? No, not necessarily. But in the end, I'm okay.
So after someone reads the book, how do you want them to feel?
I think maybe inspired to go ahead and move forward in their life.
Yeah.
That don't let those things that are holding you back hold you back. That you have the ability to move forward if you choose.
So with that in mind, and with the 3 characters of women, to me, my guess is you're in there in some shape or form, maybe with all 3 of the characters.
I am. Those who know me well probably can spot a few places where I am. My feelings are there throughout all of it, because you're told to write about what you know, and I don't know anything about Ukraine. Well, I mean, except what I've now researched, but I've never lived there. But I do know people, and I do understand feelings, and I do know when times are tough, and I do know how you can handle it well and how you can handle it not so well. And so, yeah, I think a lot of my experiences, at least in how I felt through different experiences, are there in that book.
So the ability to maybe change somebody's perspective by reading the book, or seeing something that maybe hadn't occurred to them, is a win.
It is a win.
It is a huge win that you have that ability. Somebody who doubted themselves, who said, I can't do this, or my first 2 novels were not good. But isn't that the ultimate compliment, that you could maybe influence someone's thinking? That
someone can come out of it saying, well, maybe I can. I think that would be an excellent win. I mean, we all want the book to be, there isn't an author in the world that doesn't want their book to be a movie and, all these big accolades. I mean, of course we want that. But really, I think what most writers want is for their readers to connect with the book in some way and to walk away feeling like they're the better for it.
Yeah. Tell me about you. You have 4 children.
Yeah.
And they've all read the book.
I think there may be one that hasn't finished it yet.
Well, cut them out of your will.
Cut them out of the will. That's it.
That's crazy. What is their take on what Mom has done?
I think that it's interesting because they're all at different ages.
Yeah.
And so my older ones in particular, I think, are a little more, I don't know, I think they look at it like, wow, that's my mom.
Right.
I know when my 29-year-old was reading the book, she said that, in fact, the best compliment in the world from her was, I was reading last night, Mom, and I forgot it was your book. And all of a sudden
That's a great compliment.
Yes, and all of a sudden I thought, oh, my mom wrote this.
That's a great
and that to
compliment.
me was an amazing compliment because it meant she was not reading it out of obligation anymore.
Right. That's
So,
terrific.
yeah.
It's funny how kids, look at their parents. Sometimes maybe they know them too much, so that
Yes.
their comments might be too slanted.
Well, I'm mom.
Yeah.
I'm that person that, makes grilled cheese sandwiches and, makes sure that everyone has their coats and all of those things that they grew up with for so long that it's kind of hard to let people you know and love change and evolve. You see them in a particular way, and I was a mom for a long time, and I loved that role, and I'm still a mother, but I'm more.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little hard to kind of let people in your life, and not just children to parents, but parents to children and siblings to siblings, to let them kind of grow and evolve and become something that maybe they weren't before.
In the world we live in of social media, sometimes writing gets kind of pushed to the back. People are just throwing out short-term versions of thoughts and this and that. And I've always loved to write. I've never been a writer, but I'm in a business where writing is a very important, and communicating is a very important part of being a broker. And doing it correctly, the value of the spoken word and good grammar and thoughtful, because you put it in print and it's there for people to see. Unfortunately, it's a lost art. And even in some of the music today, the words that they use and the lyrics, everything is like a catchphrase, or it's ugh. And I can't imagine in the next generation how those things are going to last.
I think that they will, because the generation before us looked at our generation and said the very same thing. And yet there are still good books being put out there. There are people who somehow are born with an understanding of what words can do. And they're drawn to reading and writing, and they're drawn to making music, and they're drawn to those kinds of things. So I don't think the written word's going anywhere. I think
right.
we're having a little bit of a crisis at the moment where, if you can't fit it into a hashtag, it doesn't work. But
or TikTok.
Yeah. But there are a lot of good writers out there. And I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of really good writers. So it's there. It's there. And there are a lot of good young writers, and I've met a lot of them as well. And so I think it's just a matter of helping them to understand that the written word is not going away. Don't believe that the printed word is going away, because it's not.
What kind of advice would you give to a junior or senior high school class of students who came to listen to you lecture?
First of all, I would hate that I was lecturing. I would hope that I was doing a question and an answer.
Question and answer, Q&A.
But I think I would tell them, just write. First of all, write. You don't get better at something unless you've done it over and over and over. What is there, that 10,000 hour rule or whatever it is about before you can be an expert? And so you're not going to be able to play tennis unless you play tennis, and you're not going to be able to paint unless you paint, and you're not going to be able to write unless you write. So if writing is something that appeals to you, write. Put it down and write. And then be willing to look at what you've written critically and say, well, what could I do to make that better? And if you're not the person that can do that, then give it to someone you trust to say, what could I do to make this better? And then don't get defensive. Listen, take that in, try it out, see if it works for you. And I think the final piece of advice is, not everybody's going to like what you write, and not everybody's going to get you. And so sometimes you're going to get advice that is not correct for you. And it's okay to try it out, realize it's not for you, and move on. Because just because someone has maybe like an editor title to their name, or they're an English teacher, or they've even gone through and they've gotten, a degree in creative writing, doesn't mean that they know everything there is to know about writing.
Right.
And they certainly don't know everything there is to know about you. And so it's okay to hear their advice and then say, that piece of advice is not for me. If, however, you're saying that to every piece of advice that comes to you, you probably need a little check, But as long as you can look at things and say, I like this and I like this, but that doesn't suit the way I feel or the way I write or the way I experience life, then it's okay to just put that aside. Your writing is never going to appeal to everyone.
Yeah. Would you encourage students who think they want to be a writer, even though they may not even know what that means or how to get there, would be to write into their spirit?
Yeah.
In other words, things that they're really interested in, as opposed to something that is a little bit divorced from their...
Yeah, so we're told to write what we know.
Yeah.
And that's true to a point. You don't have to, like if you really like sci-fi type stuff, you can't know it. It's not real.
Right.
But you can write to what you understand
Right.
to yourself.
Right.
So I think that's the key, is write things that matter to you, that mean something to you, and that when you're done with it, you're going to be proud that you at least attempted it.
In addition to writing, you're also a content creation specialist. And since time is short, tell me what you are talking about when you talk about content creation.
So a lot of small businesses need written material. You talked about that.
Yep.
And people are not good at it. They have these great ideas, but they don't have a way of getting it down on paper so that their customers can understand. And so I help them do that. So
That's huge.
I do things on websites for them and create blog content and create articles that get put out into different journals and things that help them get what they have on the inside to the outside.
Yeah. And they can find that information on your website?
Yes.
Which is...
So it's www.terimmbrown, and that's Teri with one R.com. And you can find information about my book there. And then also the freelance work that I do for content creation is on there as well.
And people can, if they want to go online and read about your book or purchase your book, where would they go?
So they can go to that website.
Okay.
So TeriMBrown.com.
Okay.
And then it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and the local bookstore has a couple copies. So
the Country Bookshop?
Country Bookshop has
great.
a couple copies.
Okay.
Yeah. So, by all means, run down there and then buy them up and then tell them that they need more.
On many levels, you've arrived.
Yes.
And whether the book is financially successful or middle of the road, you've still arrived.
I have. I now wake up in the morning and believe I'm an author.
Yeah. I believe you are too. Teri, it's been great to have you on.
It has been wonderful being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, you're a great speaker. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And Teri Brown is the author, and Sunflowers Beneath the Snow is the book. And hopefully we'll have occasion to get you back here again.
Wonderful. Thank you.
This is All Things Moore County. Have a great week. Thank you.